Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at the ethics of abortion in our continuing study of biblical ethics. Geisler points out that there's three primary views. First of all, one that says the unborn is fully human, the second that says it's potentially human, the third that says it's not yet human, and in other words, not human at all. With regards to abortion, the first of those says that abortion is always wrong, that you should never perform an abortion because you're killing a human being. The second says, well, there might be times, because it's only potentially human, might be times when it's appropriate, depending on the situation or how advanced that life form is. The third, if it's not yet human until it's born, then you can do an abortion anytime. 5 minutes before the child's going to be born, you can go in and kill it, which would be true if the child is not yet human. And so that's really going to be the question. Are we talking about a human? Or are we talking about something potentially human or not yet human? The basis then of the fully human position is that you're saying there's a sanctity of life, that if you were dealing with a human life, you should never take a human life. If you're saying it's only potential, well, has it emerged yet? Has the life actually there? Has it made that transition from just some cells to a human being? Or the quality of life issue is really the question, because there's no quality of life for the baby that's put to death. The quality of life is on the part of the mother, not really the child, because the child's killed, unless you're saying it's better for the child not to be born. And it's interesting that I say it that way, because there's going to be a biblical passage that echoes that thought. Three views of abortion with regard to the mother's right. If it's fully human, well, the right for life is seen to trump over the right to privacy. In other words, I can have my right to privacy, but that stops when it involves killing somebody else. I say, I don't like it that somebody came into my room and bothered me. I have a right to privacy, so therefore I'm going to shoot them. That just doesn't ring true. With regard to the idea that it's only potentially human, that there's a combination of rights. The mother's right versus the right of that life. Is it potentially human? What kind of life is it? And that's seen as sort of a gray area. If the child isn't yet human, then privacy is over the right to life, and there is no, it's perfectly okay to kill whatever I want to kill. This has been an issue that has deeply divided not just our country, but countries around the world. The Supreme Court, in its landmark decision, Roe v. Wade, said we need not resolve the difficult question of when life begins. When those trained in the respective disciplines of medicine, philosophy, and theology are unable to arrive at any consensus, the judiciary, speaking of themselves at this point in the development of man's knowledge, is not in a position to speculate as to the answer. And so they voted to allow for abortions, which is an interesting idea, where if we're not sure if we're doing right or wrong, then we're going to allow what potentially could be wrong. It's sort of a unique decision, and to be sure, a split decision. This comic strip portrays this idea how the Supreme Court in the past has made some decisions. Notice here's an individual saying, I know how you feel. I was a slave down there. The courts didn't think I was fully human either. Maybe that's appropriate, maybe not. The biblical view, again, people have looked at a number of passages. Ecclesiastes chapter 6 has been taken by some to suggest, well, maybe that child in the womb is not yet human. Ecclesiastes 6, beginning verse 3, says, if a man fathers 100 children and lives many years, however many they may be, but his soul is not satisfied with good things, and he does not even have a proper burial, then I say, here's the conclusion of what a person like that is, better the miscarriage than he, for it comes in futility and goes into obscurity, and its name is covered in obscurity. The passage goes on to say, it never sees the sun and it never knows anything. It's better off than he. Now, the point isn't about abortion. But the point is, that a unfulfilled life, a useless life, is better to not be a life at all. Um, and now that's not really stating anything about whether that child is, becomes a child or not. But it's saying, it's better off never to have been born. It's never better to have not even gotten there. Some other arguments that are typically used to support abortion. First of all, it's claimed that embryos are not self-conscious. It's claimed that the embryo and the child in the womb is seen as an extension of the mother's womb until the time of birth, and it's true. There's a connection there. It's claimed that women have autonomous rights over their own bodies. It's their body; they can do with what they want, and under normal conditions, I would agree. If you get to decide what happens with your hand and so on, as long as it's not affecting somebody else. That legalized abortions are safer than illegal abortions, and so this is used to justify it. So we might as well make it legal, so that way, you won't have sort of backstreet things happening that can cause death and dismemberment to the mother. And finally, the claim is that unwanted babies suffer from abuse. I have to admit that this is a little close to home because my own mother was unwanted. Now, she was born in a day when abortions were not legal, so she was born instead, and she was given away to some high school kids. The mother gave her away in a shoe store and said, "Here, you want a baby?" And they brought this baby home and said, "Gee, Mom, look what was given to us. Can we keep it?" And of course, she lived a full, long life, and that's part of my own family heritage. So there's a sense in which that story has become indirectly my story. Some other arguments for abortion, that the argument from deformity. We noticed in the last session we talked about how the Romans sometimes and Greeks would say, gee, if a child is born that's deformed, then it's okay to kill that child. And so this is taken, not that we should kill a child that's already been born that's deformed, but in the womb, modern medicine can maybe see certain deformities and say, we'll give this child life, but we won't give that child life. The argument from rape, and there have been some laws proposed that abortion be illegal except in the case of a rape, which again asks the question of who are you punishing. If the child is a living person, then you're saying, well, we're going to punish the child on because of the sins of the parent, but that's another argument that's used. And then the argument is used that it's unclear when life begins, and that begs the question of, well, therefore, do I act responsibly or do I act irresponsibly? For example, if I undertake an action that might cause somebody's death, but it might not, am I held liable if I do or don't? And is it okay to do something that might cause the death of an innocent person? But that's an argument that's used for abortion. And ultimately, the issue is whether we're talking about personhood or not. An embryo, by those who are supporting abortion, is not considered to be a person, therefore it is deemed okay. Now, there are some passages in the Bible that also reflect this idea that the one in the womb is human. Job chapter 31, verse 15. This is poetic, but it says, did not he who made me in the womb make him? And the same one fashioned us in the womb. In other words, we were fashioned in the womb. Psalm chapter 139, that's the chapter that talks about how God knows everything, even the deep things, and he goes on to say in verse 13, for you formed my inward parts, you wove me in my mother's womb. I will give thanks to you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, and my soul knows it very well, so that we were formed in the womb. Verse 15 goes on to say, my frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the depths of the earth. Verse 16, your eyes have seen my unformed substance, and in your book were all written the days that were ordained for me, when as yet there was not one of them. And so God is pictured here forming us caring for us, involved in us even when we were in the womb, even when no eye had seen us as of yet. Another passage I think that perhaps bears into this is Luke chapter 1, and this is the story where Mary has conceived and is going to be giving birth to Jesus. And we read, beginning in verse 39, Luke chapter 1, verse 39, Now at this time Mary arose and went in a hurry to the hill country, to a city of Judah, and entered the house of Zacharias and greeted Elizabeth. And earlier in the story we'd read about how Elizabeth had also become pregnant. Verse 41, when Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the baby, that is the baby that Elizabeth was carrying, doesn't use the word fetus or zygote or anything like that, it's the baby, leaped in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. We go on to read, as Elizabeth is speaking, as she's filled with the Holy Spirit, she says, "For behold, when the sound of your greeting reached my ears, the baby leaped in my womb for joy." Now, to attribute joy to a baby in the womb is tantamount to expressing personhood. It's a reminder of a personal story when our daughter was pregnant with, I'm trying to remember which one, whether it was Andrew or Leah, my two grandchildren, I forget which one it was, but she began having contractions, and even I think it might have been that her water broke while she was in church during the worship service. Our pastor made the mention after, because they had to get up and leave in a hurry, and our pastor made mention it was the baby leaping in the womb for joy as he heard the preaching of the word. Now, I'm not sure if that was quite the case, but it calls this passage to mind. Now, some other arguments that are made for life. First of all, humanity is not linked to breathing. When you say that life begins when the baby takes a breath, we continue to be human after we've stopped breathing. There have been times where, as a rescue worker, I've come upon a scene. I was a firefighter for many years, and got to a scene, and there was somebody not breathing. Well, we didn't just say, well, that person's no longer human. No, we did what we could do to revive them. We would artificially breathe for them and perhaps bring them back so that they could continue to be alive. And that's not where we drew the line at being either human or alive. Adam now was a unique case where Adam's body was formed and then God breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, but that's not the way it normally takes place with us. Knowledge and ignorance do not make one more or less human. So just because that baby doesn't know that much yet, when the baby's first born, when a baby is born and now is alive, we don't take that baby and kill it if we don't want it, even though that baby doesn't know very much. In fact, it could be argued whether that newborn baby really knows anything yet. You could say, well, that's only potential. And yet we see that baby, that born baby, as having rights. Self-consciousness, therefore, does not make one human. For example, I don't have a whole lot of self-consciousness going on when I'm asleep. Perhaps I'm dreaming, perhaps I'm not. That newborn baby doesn't have a lot in the way of self-consciousness. They're not saying, "Oh, gee, hi, Mom and Dad, I'm now alive." I don't know how much self-consciousness is going on. And yet we consider them to be human. Some other arguments for life. Embryos are not merely an extension of the mother. They already have independent gender, and they have separate brain waves, and there is different blood type. There's no new genetic information that's going to be added. They are sort of becoming who they are. With regard to this personhood, we ask the question then, is one in the womb, is a baby in the womb, a fetus, is that a person? And that really brings up the question, what makes one a person? If a person is sort of vague, it's sort of normative, people have rights. And the question is this one in the womb, is this a people? Is this a person? We really need a criteria for being a person. And so this criteria for person, first of all, is biological. There's genes and appearance and brain activity, just elements of biology. But also there's independence. In other words, there's viability. Well, can I continue to live? There is consciousness. These are different arguments that are used. I don't know if they all fit, because after all, a baby is not independent. If a newborn baby, if you just put him aside and don't care for him, he's not viable. Consciousness, well, that baby is probably not conscious of a whole lot, eating and sleeping and food going in one side and coming out the other. There's not a lot of consciousness going on. Are they self-conscious? I'm not sure how much a baby is, a newborn baby. I'm not sure how self-conscious I am when I'm asleep, or somebody who is maybe temporarily or even permanently in a coma. Have they lost their right to personhood? Is physical separation the thing that makes them a person? Now, before you answer that, think about two babies that are born that are connected, Siamese twins, and yet they're still connected, and yet we both consider them to be people. Is autonomy the fact that they have a self-concept and plans for the future and things like that? How much of those do babies have? How much does someone have who is, again, I use the example of somebody in a coma. Have they lost their personhood? As we begin to look at the growth of a baby, and I think this might be helpful, maybe it's not. At 4 weeks, a genetic pattern has been established since conception. The heart, the eyes, and the nervous system has been formed at this very early time. By 6 weeks, we have arms and legs that are formed. The skeleton is complete. Reflexes are starting to take place where they can begin to move. Brain waves are now present. At 7 weeks, we have brain activity now being present. The appearance is complete. At 8 weeks, is now officially what we call a fetus. All the systems are in place. And you just need to take that baby and develop it and increase it in size. It's going to continue to get bigger. At 11 weeks, we have the arms and legs move. The baby now can begin to suck its thumb. It inhales and exhales. It's doing the fluid, the amniotic fluid. There's not necessarily an oxygen atmosphere in there. At 12 weeks, we begin to see the fingers and toes that can be seen. They're taking shape. At 16 weeks, this baby is holding on to things, is swimming, is kicking, is moving, is turning somersaults. At 18 weeks, the vocal cords work and the fetus can now cry. At 20 weeks, we begin to see this baby looks entirely like ready to come out. He's still not quite fully baked yet, and yet is looking like a baby. Here's the baby at 24 weeks. And here's the baby quite a few weeks later that now has been born. At what point does this become a true baby? At what point does this baby have rights? This cartoon, here's a woman who's tossing a baby out. It's my car, and I can do with my car what I want. And we would say, well, that's awful. That's terrible. And yet, here's a woman going to say, it's my body. I'm going to kill that baby by having an abortion. And so abortion really is involving killing what has a right to life. And as a Christian, we believe it's wrong to kill anything that has a right to life. And if a fetus has a right to life, if this child in the womb has a right to life, then it's wrong to kill that child. Others have a perfect obligation not to interfere with that child's living, with that child's right to life. And others have a perfect obligation not to kill that one in the womb.